You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guest about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. When you have the opportunity to have a guest who can be addressed as doctor, you know you're in the presence of wisdom. Thankfully, today's guest, Dr. DeWitt, has asked me to call him Tom, so we're both in wise and informal hands. I've come to know Tom through shared customer experience networking and find him to be one of the most interesting people out there. When I first talked with Tom, he was wrapping up a long-term stay in Ecuador. Once I realized that, I knew I would get a great global perspective on customer experience from Tom. Along with a wonderful global perspective, both in CX and just life in general, Tom is instrumental in driving education in the customer experience space, helping to bring unity to what is often a globally fragmented approach to CX. And of course, we'll talk travel given Tom's approach to the globe. Tom, welcome to CX Passport.
Hey, thanks for having me here. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So I know you and I have become connected because of that shared interest in the globe. Mm-hmm. Tell me, why is that global perspective so important for customer experience?
To me, it's important for a couple of reasons. One, the cultures in which we're born and raised help to shape us as consumers, both in terms of how we make decisions, and who influences those decisions. And so I think, from a consumer standpoint, it's really fascinating to understand. I spent 10 years spending a month in Korea every summer teaching Asian consumer behavior. And nice. It was fascinating because I've spent much of my life living and working in Asia, but perhaps Korea, like no other place, do other people than the person actually purchasing have a say and influence in the process, from where people go to school, the jobs that they choose, the clothes that they wear are all a reflection of the personal influence that their friends and parents and other family members have on them, primarily through normative influence, a series of rewards and punishments. So you've got that on one end of the spectrum, and then on the other end of the spectrum, and we're seeing that right now with COVID and how some people are choosing to deal with it, is a country and a culture that's based on individual choice and on individual freedoms. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes the individual and his or her needs coming from before those of the group, which is a total opposite of Asia. So that's fascinating. What's also very fascinating and a reason to have a global perspective is how service providers or product providers in other countries help to deliver on needs that are essentially common across human beings around the planet, from how we eat to how we groom ourselves, to another interesting thing about Korea and the influence of the group is the abundance of mirrors you see everywhere, because people have to check their appearance, So I think to me, what's interesting is, first of all, you have this wide range of cultural differences in terms of consumers. And if you think about the consumer decision-making process and what comes to bear on that, and then you have how businesses or organizations in different cultures serve those needs and how they differ. And that, honestly, it's that drives me to travel so much, because I love to experience different cultures as a consumer, but also as a marketer and customer experience practitioner. I love to watch how they do it. and where are there opportunities, where are there shortfalls, where are there just interesting perspectives. I think one of the things we talked about in our last conversation was how in Ecuador, yogurt is consumed in liquid form, and it often comes in gallon jugs and sometimes even in plastic bags that you clip the corner and you pour it into a glass. So, I mean, to me, that's fascinating. Another example, I was in Copenhagen a few years ago, and my wife and I were staying in a service apartment. And she said, I wonder if there's a washer and dryer in here. We searched high and low. We couldn't find it. And she's in the bathroom. She says, I found it. And I go, where? And she said, it's in the vanity. It was literally a pocket size or a really small size. It was a washer with an extractor. So that's the other thing that's interesting, is that many countries around the world don't use dryers. They'll use an extractor as part of the washing process. In fact, in Korea, they'll even warm up the laundry. So when you pull it out of the washer, it's warm and it's damp. And then you hang it on a hanger or you hang it on another drying device. So I think, it's important as customer experience professionals to understand and respect the fact that there are multiple ways to come at a common problem, like eating, nutrition, or washing clothes, and not feel that your perspective is the only way or the best way. So to me, it's that global perspective is important for opening up our minds and understanding both the consumer as well as practitioners.
Yeah. And I think, certainly hearing you and the travels that you've had and the fact, and we'll talk later about your experience down there in Ecuador. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing more about that. But it is so true that when you do get the chance to travel, when you do see other cultures, it opens your eyes, if they weren't opened already, to the fact that, hey, just because the way I do it back home, that doesn't mean it's necessarily the right way or the wrong way. It's just my way or a different way. And so I think it definitely shows how those global travels have influenced your perspective on CX and life. I know that it's been the same for me. So, but I'm thinking about that. So if we've settled that argument, not that there was much of an argument, right, that the importance of a global perspective. So I'm curious, for those who, let's say that travel isn't available to everyone, how do we create that global perspective and customer experience? So I know, for example, when I see a lot of the voices that I see on LinkedIn in that space tend to be folks that live and look like me, but thankfully it's not exclusively so, but it's certainly overwhelmingly so. So I'm kind of curious, when you think of that global perspective, how do you make sure that we're learning from CX leaders in geographies and cultures that aren't like mine, but also beyond that, helping to expand CX as a discipline beyond Western and white?
As an older white male, I'm constantly reminded I've lived in a condition of privilege. So I think, when I think of diversity, equity, inclusion in general, and this global perspective and other perspectives in particular, I'm reminded that all of us have a role. All of us have a role in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Just because you don't consider yourself to be prejudiced, or you don't consider that you don't that you respect other people's opinion. I think it's important that all of us play a proactive role in encouraging different perspectives in whatever position we're in. So for me, that means, from CXFM radio, the podcasting network that we've created for CX, I purposely seek out other perspectives to be on the network, to seek out women's opinions, to seek out minority opinions. So, that's why when you look at our portfolio, it's not just filled with white males, although white males seem to dominate the discussion on LinkedIn, to your point.
Yeah. So
I think it's playing a role in helping to seek out those opinions and elevate them. And I feel that way in everything that I do. So it's seeking out contacts in other countries. In fact, this morning on our podcast, we interviewed someone from Germany that's come up with a really unique way to view jobs to be done and consumers' progress and accomplishing jobs to be done. So I think it's reaching across the globe. In fact, it's interesting. I was just on campus. Haven't really spent much time on campus in the past year and a half, and was thinking about walking back into the classroom and what is someone at my age who's had my experiences, what do I need to impress on my students who are at the same university where I started 40 years ago? What do I need to impress on them about life and what's important? And to me, the thing that really stuck with me is stepping out of their comfort zones, never getting comfortable. And for me, it's changing your environment. I think that's another thing. Step out of your comfort zone, put yourself in someone else's environment, and learn to understand, to feel and understand what it means to be there. And that's part of global travel, right? So I get to appreciate and understand their perspectives. That's why when I was living and working in Ecuador, I purposely sought out locals to befriend. The most comfortable thing for me to do would have been to seek out other Americans, so we can talk about American things and how we hated certain things. I hate it, and that's one thing I hate about. And no disrespect to my fellow Americans, but when they move to other countries and they spend their time complaining about it. So I think it's that, stay uncomfortable, put yourself in uncomfortable situations where you're going to grow and develop, and appreciate the way that people do things there, and to gain an understanding and perspective of what it means to live in that culture by befriending the people who are there. I think it comes from community building too. A lot of what I do, like 75% of my time is spent on community building and bringing people of diverse backgrounds and opinions together to share their understanding and knowledge of customer experience management. This morning I had 4 people on a call. One was in Hungary, one was in on the west coast of the US, and let's see, where were the other 2? In the middle somewhere, and I had a lot of those calls. So I think that, it's really build communities, bring people together, and purposely seek out people from backgrounds who are different than yours and those in your community, so that they can better understand them.
I like that approach, and I think you wove several themes in there that make a lot of sense to me. One is, let's start with travel for a second, right? Getting uncomfortable. Travel often is, immersive travel is that getting uncomfortable, getting out there. There's a place for relaxation travel, and I'm not against that or anything like that. But that exploratory and immersive travel, that's how you really get to understand that culture. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about your Ecuador experience, because there's a lot that you've got down there. But that idea of consciously choosing to not seek out voices that aren't your voice and seek out ways to amplify those voices is important. I think there's kind of the other side of that too. So there's voices out there that already have that and is a part of CX disciplines and understanding and approaches across the globe. But I know that there's also this desire to sort of create this education and create sort of a global understanding of customer experience and the approach to that. And I know that's something that you've taken a very practical approach to, having launched the building process for that CX Masters program at Michigan State University. I really would like for you to spend some time. Help me understand that vision, that CX Masters program. What do you see with that? How do you see that growing? And kind of what's the vision and the growth for that?
Okay, great question. Something I think about and
I got to imagine you think about it quite a bit.
Every day, a lot. Well, I mean, the first thing, when I'll be completely honest with you, a little over 3 years ago, I'd never heard of CX. I was living in Hawaii, working in Hawaii. I'd been there 11 years. Made the decision to return to Michigan State, primarily for career reasons, but more because I needed to be in an environment where I was contributing and feeling fulfilled. I had worked in what hadn't been customer experience management till then. I think can't quite remember what we called it back then, but maybe it was customer experience, but we just hadn't put the CX on it yet. But I had my own consulting firm there, and while I was a professor in Hawaii, but I had this opportunity when I came to Michigan to lead an initiative around customer experience, that I could pick and choose what I wanted to do and drive it. And initially it was on community building. If you haven't already gathered, I love bringing people together because I feel that there's so much to be learned from one another. So my focus was on community building, and it started very practically with one day industry best practice programs at Michigan State, where we brought people together in person. And it was part of that effort where I was doing networking and LinkedIn, and I realized that, the practitioners in CX come from very divergent backgrounds, from market research to sales to supply chain management, you name it. And in talking to those people, what kept coming up in discussions was CX is fragmented. Every time I bring it up now, people just start nodding their head. And there were different interpretations of what that meant because,
right.
Naturally, well, what do you mean by that? And generally, they fell into one of two areas. One was the skill sets are fragmented, meaning, there are people that working in an organization in a CX function, but there are very people who have the comprehensive set of skills necessary to effectively manage customer experience for an organization. The second definition of fragmentation was how the organization defined it. In the most comprehensive and holistic sense, customer experience management should be a mindset in an organization with everyone in the organization, a singular focus on the customer and
right.
how to meet their needs and supporting it. But oftentimes you find CX is confined to the call center or consumer insights.
Right.
So I view that as a call to action. In fact, I think it was at our first symposium that I announced to the crowd that we were going to begin working on creating a master's degree in customer experience management, because my research had found very few programs in the world. And, and seemingly, again, thinking back to LinkedIn, very few people out there that whose career was based in a solid foundation of an academic discipline. Okay. So when it came to building this out, even with the first symposium, the thoughts were around what are the different competencies that are necessary to effectively manage a customer experience, from being a customer-centric organization and customer experience management being a natural extension of that, to understanding the customer and the employee. And I think that's the other big part of this process, and I'm sure you've had conversations about, is the importance of not only leadership alignment, but employee engagement. To what extent does everyone in the organization understand not only the mission and vision of the company, but what is their personal role in delivering on the needs of the customer, and how is that embedded in the values of the organization, and how are those values reinforced and reflected in the individuals who work there? To experience design. So there's plenty of organizations out there that have customer personas and journey maps on the shelf, but very few know what to do with them, because oftentimes they are done by outside consultants. And data integration and visualization, putting the right information in front of the right people. And again, employee experience and employee engagement. So, we basically boiled all that down to 5 core competencies in our degree program that kind of reflect what I've talked about, and 15 modules that fall within those 5 main competencies. And it's that, to me, that's kind of become our roadmap for advancing customer experience management globally. So while the degree is in the approval process right now at Michigan State, it's about 2/3 in. We expect it to be fully approved in December with a launch of the degree next May. It will be fully online, 15 5-week modules, 20 weeks long, targeting working professionals anywhere in the world. We've taken a unique approach in developing the degree and in marketing the degree, in that we're focused on companies, on corporations or organizations,
Okay.
and their CX function.
Yeah.
So this is more of a partnership with organizations to not only enroll their employees in the degree, which they have to agree to ensure that at
Right.
least one employee is in there, because we want to make sure they buy into that process. But to work as a collaborative. So what started as an advisory board is now a collaborative in advancing the field. So far I have 34 corporations that have signed up to be part of this collaborative, and they serve on one of 8 action teams, 5 around the core competencies I've talked about. Another one in diversity, equity, inclusion, which you've already brought up,
Right.
its importance. And then 2 around functional areas, webinar and conference delivery, and the other around marketing communications. And the goal is to deliver conferences globally, to deliver webinars, all focus on industry best practices in those 5 functional areas and 15 modules, as well as creating support groups around the 5 core competencies of customer experience management and a mentorship program. And I'll also add industry support groups because there seems to be a lot of interest there. With all of these entities, all these activities being run by collaborative, the collaboration members, I expect that number to grow from 35 to hopefully to 70 and eventually 100 corporations around the world. Right now, the 34 corporations are largely in the US. We have a couple outside the US. But, back to our discussion previously, is we want those perspectives, right? So if we have an industry support group for the insurance industry, and there are members from Asia and Latin America and Europe and North America, how do they approach a common issue in that industry, and how do they approach it differently, and what can they learn from it?
Whew, that is one heck of a program that you're putting in place, Tom. I got to imagine that with all of your travels, with all of that, sometimes it's nice to just kick back and relax a little bit. So let's have a little change of pace here. Join me in the first class lounge. We'll move quickly here and hopefully have some fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
Oh man, there's so many.
Yeah.
I get asked that question a lot. And I've been to over 40 countries I've lived in for now. And what was my favorite? And it's an amalgamation of all of them. I shared with you, Cuenca, Ecuador is a very, very special place. It reminds me in terms of the architecture a lot like Europe, and even the cafe and restaurant culture a lot like Europe, where they take food and dining very seriously. Things move a little bit slower, but the result comes out so much better. So much passion goes into the food that's made there, and so much love, and the people are amazing. When I lived in Cuenca, I was so proud to say that my best friends were restaurant owners, because they were.
Genius.
I made a point to get to know the restaurant owners. It was usually husband and wife, and after a while they treated me like family every time I came in. So Cuenca holds a real strong place in my heart. I've also had incredible experiences in South Africa. Had been to Africa before, didn't know what to expect in South Africa. I spent 3 weeks staying in Stellenbosch, which is about a half an hour northeast of Cape Town, in the mountains, in the middle of wine country.
Nice.
The second oldest city in South Africa. still a lot of architecture there that was heavily influenced by the Dutch, still had thatched roofs. But again, the people, the warmth of the people and their, so engaging on a personal level. And again, it comes back to food. The food was splendid. And I'm a person who travels on my stomach quite literally, to me, the two go hand in hand. So enjoying that. 120 wineries in that area. And then Asia. I have a long love affair with Asia that started in 1986. I was one of the first hospitality management educators in China. In fact, I was on a national committee back then in China that helped shape the curriculum for hospitality management education at the university level. And China was a very different world. But Asia, to me, the differences across countries, but then the commonality that runs through them with the Asian culture has always fascinated me. One thing that stands out was renting a motorbike in a small town in Thailand, and driving up into the mountains and stopping at the roadside and looking down at terraced rice paddies and someone in the rice fields with a water buffalo. And I call those National Geographic moments where I get chicken skin, and I've had a really great life. So that was amazing. I was near where the Golden Triangle used to be, and ended up in a small village in tea country where they grew tea that was grown by former Kuomintang soldiers who came there after when the communists took China over in 1949. They end up being mercenaries for the drug trade. And when the drug trade fell apart there, they ended up growing tea. And it was one of the tea shops there that, for whatever reason, the owner approached this white male and asked me if I spoke Chinese, I think in Chinese. And I was able to speak enough Chinese to get by there. And so, yeah, it's those kind of things. And I could go on and on. I could go, the encounter I had with a woman and her infant child in a cobra in Hyderabad in India. I was on one of my walkabouts, as I like to do, whether it's on motorbike or on foot. And I came across a woman with a baby in her arms. And usually that means they're begging, they usually approach you and they put their fingers to their mouth to ask for some money for some food for their baby. But this time the woman, she had a basket in her hand, a fairly large basket. And she took the lid off and a cobra jumped out.
Oh gosh.
Now I knew enough that the cobra was probably defanged, but it shocked me so much. I literally ran away. So, when you ask me about my favorite travel memory, I have so many, and there's not one place. And it's that ability to engage with the culture and the people and those conversations. And I can remember in South Africa, I got to know the women that worked in the bed and breakfast where I stayed, and I thanked them. I said, "Thank you for helping me to fall in love with South Africa." I said, "I don't want to leave." And it was at that point they invited me to stay and actually move in with them.
Oh my gosh.
Their home. Yeah. So,
I knew that asking you that question would create just a set of stories that I could kick back and enjoy. Well, delightful to hear. So now I'm going to try the same challenge of a question in that same space, but what is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
Antarctica. I've been most of the places in the world where there's people. I'd love to go to a place where there aren't many, but then there's that natural beauty. So, that's definitely on my list. So Antarctica, as well as other places, South America and Ecuador were on my list before because it was a place where I hadn't been, but other places like Iceland, again,
you just have an ongoing just wanderlust. You just need to get out on the road. It sounds like this will be interesting.
Always. That's another reason why I got up and left for Ecuador too. I have this constant itch that needs to be scratched. But I think it comes from a natural curiosity about the rest of the world and our place in it too. I think the beauty of travel is it forces you to look back at yourself in your own life.
Travelers are frequently the most curious people that are out there. So let me keep us going here in the First Class Lounge. I know that we talked about how you travel on your stomach. So I think I'm asking you a challenging question again, but what is a favorite thing to eat?
Singapore hawker center food. If there's one place in the world, if you ask me, if you could choose one place in the world to eat, where would it be? It would be in Singapore. And in Singapore, and I can give you a laundry list from char kway teow to carrot cake to Hokkien meat to satay go to Singapore in a hawker center, and for $2 or $3 you can choose from different stalls, all that specialized in different food.
Boy, that sounds awesome.
And yeah, if I'd that, and one of my all-time favorite things to eat is a Midwestern favorite, American fry for breakfast, American fries with onions and 2 eggs basted. That would probably, if I had to choose one last meal, probably because it's my comfort food.
Yeah.
But, I grew up as a kid. It was a treat for me on a Saturday to go to a diner and have home fries or American fries, grilled potatoes with grilled onions. And I know it's blasphemy to some people, but I put ketchup on my basted eggs and potatoes too. But I think that would be that would be my last meal.
Yeah. Nobody tells you what to eat. If you enjoy it, you eat it, by God.
That's it.
Now, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but what is a thing your parents forced you to eat, but you hated as a kid?
I'm fortunate. I never hated any food, but if I have a childhood memory, a bad memory with food, it's being made to sit at the table to finish food that was put on my plate and I hadn't eaten. And I remember that food was a cold hamburger.
Oh, gosh.
There's nothing worse than a cold hamburger, sitting on your plate. But, I've always loved fruits. I've always loved vegetables.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing, if there's one thing that I refuse to eat though, it's durian, which it kind of smells like an armpit. Yeah. And I'm told it's delicious, but I'm not going there. Yeah.
Well, let's close out the lounge with one travel item. So I like to ask folks, what is one travel item, and you can't include your phone, that you will not leave home without?
You mean not including my passport too?
That's true. I think my last guy said passport. I'm going to have to start excluding things.
Okay. So
no phone, no passport.
Toothbrush. Let's see. So, in today's world, if I have my passport and a toothbrush and I've got enough cash to buy anything else I want, then I'm free. In fact, I'm kind of become, when I went to Ecuador, not necessarily knowing I was going to be there for 6 months, but knowing I was going to be there for 3 months, I went there with enough clothes to keep myself comfortable. And that was it. To me, part of the fun is remaking your life wherever you go, and not taking along the necessities. I'm taken back to a story someone shared with me about a college student going on one of those, those college trips where they learn and everything. It was supposed to be backpacking in the jungle in the Caribbean, and they brought a suitcase instead of a backpack, and they brought along a hairdryer, not thinking where they would ever. So, when I travel, I prefer to adapt. So, one of my, that same trip where I went up in the mountains, I had forgotten that I had left my passport as collateral when I got the motorbike. And when the day came for me to leave that location, I couldn't find my passport anywhere. And I was horrified. And I finally said, well, I hope it's there. And it was. So really, the only thing I need to travel is my passport.
Man, Tom, what a phenomenal set of travel and eating, and just, it's clear that you've got this perspective of the globe. And that's one of the things that I really admire with you. And I'm sitting here thinking, my gosh, we're almost out of time. I'm clearly going to have you back on as a guest sometime so we can amplify other areas. But I want to talk to you a little bit about that trip in Ecuador. I promise that we'll talk about that. And here's our chance. But one of the things that impressed me when you and I were talking earlier is, and you've woven it even into our conversation already, but it's this this deep spirit on assimilation, that you don't go to just be sort of a bungee exposure, but rather you're really trying to assimilate. And I know that's not always the case with expats. So I'm kind of just go wide ranging as you close us out here. So why do you choose to assimilate? How do you go about that? And then, what are people really missing out on when they don't fully dive into that new culture, be it full scale expat style or just on their vacation travels?
What really drives me, my motivation for travel is based on curiosity, right? So it's based on learning and understanding different cultures. And it's hard to do that if you when you travel, that you insist on living the same lifestyle that you did in the US. It's people that go to McDonald's when they travel. Now, that's one of my rules. You never go to McDonald's. On some of those summers in Korea, I might end up there for a burger every once in a while. But so I think it's that, you have to have a natural curiosity about how the rest of the world works. And for me, it's that, it was my first trip overseas, which was in Singapore, when I realized that how much my senses came alive. The smells I smelled, the languages I heard, the things that I saw, and it was my stepmother who visited me when I lived in Singapore, and she really brought it to light. She said, "It's like I've been watching black and white TV all my life, and now I can see color TV."
Wow. I like that.
And I think you have to travel with that perspective, right? And you need to be willing. I've expressed a little bit about the importance of being uncomfortable. You have to be willing to take some risks and be uncomfortable and accept things for the way they are where you travel, particularly in developing countries. And that's usually where I'm most happiest, because it is so different and it is so unnatural compared to our life here. And I usually spend a lot of time just watching and listening, and it's like I'm at a movie. Just imagine yourself, why do you go to the movies? It's so you can get immersed in a different world. And the thing that I notice when I'm traveling abroad is I totally forget about my life back in the US. Totally. I have to, and I find myself waking up in the morning just trying to remember where I am. And I've had some, I had one summer I was in 11 different countries. So literally it was really hard sometimes to remember where I was. But I think in order to immerse yourself in a country, you have to go in it with that curiosity and that desire to learn, and resist the temptation to get the trappings of an American culture. In fact, I remember one year every haircut I got in 1 year was in a different country. I would literally wait because I wanted to experience. And the most memorable was an equivalent of a $2 haircut. I think it was in that village in northern Thailand. And one of the things that was interesting about the haircut is they turned my head on its side and they trimmed all the hair inside my ear using a razor blade. So, that's what you have to do,
exactly.
And I remember, I can to this day remember my first haircut and shave in China in 1986, a straight razor at my throat, and wondering, are they going to kill the imperialist dog today, or am I going to walk out alive? But so I've got a whole life of those kind of memories, but those were all situations where I had to put myself in normally what be in an uncommon situation for most people. But to me, I revel in, diversity. I revel in diversity, and the best place to find diversity is outside of your own culture and in someplace else. And you have to walk into it like you're going into a matinee, and you just want to get lost in it. And some of the best ways are just to sit there and watch and listen. And I'm not really proud to say this. I've just never been very good at learning languages or disciplined enough to do so. It's amazing what you can get by just by learning to say hello and thank you in a language. And that's generally how I get by.
And it's amazing how few folks I know when I've traveled with skip that step. It's just the basics. And I have certainly found in my limited, compared to you, my limited travels, how just those simple pleasantries melt any sort of barrier. There's the realization that at least you're trying. And so I've found that to be the case. Man, Tom, I'm sitting here just sort of blown away. You talked about sitting back at a movie at a matinee. I feel like I just went through a movie and I was kicking back and just enjoyed the immersive experience of listening to your stories and gleaning from your wisdom. One thing I do want to ask, if our listeners did want to learn a little bit more about you or the CX Masters program, where should they go to learn about that or learn more about you?
Well, yeah, we haven't really publicized a whole lot about the master's degree because it's not approved yet, but I would love to chat with anyone about it. The best way to find me is through LinkedIn. Just look up Tom DeWitt, Michigan State University. I'm easy to find.
And I'll make sure I'll make sure it's in the show notes as well.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, I mean, over the past year, I've talked to over 100 representatives of different corporations. Awesome. So I'm happy to chat with anybody about it.
Well, what a great conversation, Tom, starting from helping us understand why a global perspective matters and how that influences both your customer experience approaches and just simply your approach in life, and listening to all of your stories about how you approach ensuring that you're actively seeking other cultures, other insight, other wisdom, other inputs, and how that shaped who you are. I've been thoroughly entertained. I'm somewhat in awe with what you've been able to do and travel, and hope to add at least some of my travel journals to some of the places you've been and some of the experience that you've had. But Tom, it's been a brilliant conversation. I've enjoyed it a ton. Thank you so much for being here on CX Passport today.
Thanks. It's been great.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. Make sure to visit our website, cxpassport.com, where you can hit subscribe so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, you can check out the rest of the EX for CX website. If you're looking to get real about customer experience, EX for CX is available to help you increase revenue by starting to listen to your customers and create great experiences for every customer every time. Thanks for listening to CX Passport, and be sure to tune in for our next episode. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.